Hey everybody, I am Texan. I go by that on basically every platform it works out. I spent 3 years living in Saudi Arabia from living in the US. Entirely different culture. Unfortunately, I am very gay, and Saudi Arabia kind of has this slight issue called they execute gay people. So I had to deal with kind of terrifying homophobia while also living in a foreign country that I've never been to before and dealing with culture shock and all that. And then there was also, went to school with like royalty and diplomats, and I got to travel the world. So it's a pretty good trade off, I think. I think we should start from the beginning. So initially, Dad got out of the military, so he's looking for a new job. He got this job working for a company over in Saudi Arabia that was making bank, but the issue was that it took him away from us for like 3 months at a time. And we like being together as a family, as well, at least our family does. And that went on for about a year during seventh grade. So we'd be back for 3 months and then gone for 3 months. And it wasn't super great. I mean, sure, we got to see him and it was more than when he would get deployed, but it wasn't perfect. So, like, we got to visit him during Christmas time. That was fun. It was a little bit nerve wracking, a little bit exciting. Because when you hear about Saudi Arabia or really any Middle Eastern country, you hear war, explosions, missile attacks, terrorism. Like, well, at least what I heard is that everyone, like the entire Muslim culture, just wants to blow up Americans, like kill Christians, like all this crazy. So I'm like, why are we going over here again? If this is the response, and part of it was like, oh, Jesus. Part of it is just like Jesus, and part of it is making money. So, and I guess getting cool experience because if we can go over to another country for a while, that's cool, right?
But you didn't have the best introductory offer of the country, did you?
No, not really. I mean, again, I was coming in with a lot of preconceptions, right? So, of course, I
Yeah.
was scared. Going up Christian, this is all I'd ever heard about the Middle East. And, like, I hadn't had any, like, exposure to anyone, really any other community. And sure, I had Google, but I didn't really realize I had Google, you know? I was like,
Growing up in a bubble like that, especially a
yeah.
religious one, makes it very hard to even understand what doing your own research means. I know that because I've met a lot of people in that situation.
Yeah, that's something that I had to learn about how to do at some point. Because like going to school, it was like private Christian schools where they taught you evolution wasn't a thing, and that dinosaurs are a lie, and that the Earth is only like 15,000 years old or something. Which is, by the way, kind of boring. Like, come on, man.
Wait, they told you dinosaurs aren't real?
Yeah, the school curriculum was like, oh yeah, dinosaurs can't exist because the Earth hasn't been around long enough. I'm like, but what the fuck is that, huh? I have fossils. What? Huh? Like, I used to be pretty like anti like evolution because like taught this in school, but then I'm like, but dinosaurs. At some point, like around seventh grade is like when I'm like, I know this is kind of bullshit, but also I'm like still very Christian, you know? So that's the context for like when I was like going into Saudi, like that's where I was. So like sheltered in a bubble, but also like kind of already questioning things. So it's like, oh wait, men, that's interesting. Discovering, oh right, men exist. I like that. I shouldn't like that. That's Bible says that's wrong. Figuring out like this whole thing all at the same time. It was a bit of a time. Well, let's say that. I'd say first introductions to Saudi, like for the Christmas trip. Well, first we like traveled for an entire like 30 hours, like go across the entire planet, go from like West Coast of the United States to Middle East. Took a while. I think we had to go through like Germany, Frankfurt, like 30 hours of traveling. And then because it's like complete opposite side of the world, it's also a complete separate time. So we had to like adjust to like time change, which was a big deal. So we'd be like super jet lagged, super tired, try and stay up through the whole travel time. I don't recommend doing that. Please don't ever do that. You'll feel terrible. Please just sleep. It takes a couple weeks to adjust to the time change because, completely swapped day night cycle. It's like 12, 13-hour difference from what I'm used to. I still have friends over there, so I have to deal with that time change on occasion. The Christmas trip was only a couple of weeks long, so we didn't actually get the chance to completely adjust to that time change, but it is what it was. The compound, which is what we called the neighborhood that we were in, it was a square mile of walled off 2-story tall walls with like guards on the entrances, and but inside it was like a mini resort. It was the neighborhood for all the expats, so all the foreign people who were from outside the country to live in the country. There were a couple of these around Riyadh. The one we were in was smaller but kind of nice, and there was another one that the school was in. It was just like a lot bigger. I don't remember the exact size, but it was a couple times bigger, I think. But I'm getting ahead of myself because Christmas trip. The compound was really pretty deserted because everyone else was out on break at the time. So everyone's like, no one really wants to stay in Saudi if you can help it. Like every vacation, like the city like is deserted. Like over the summertime, like half the population just leaves because if you leave your shoes outside, they'll melt. Had that happen once. Didn't make that mistake twice.
And can I ask what state or area you were living in? Like, what was the temperature usually for you before you moved?
Pacific Northwest, so used to like perpetual rainfall in the wintertime. Like in the summertime, it would get up to the 80s. Like occasionally the hundreds if you have a really hot day, but like rare. Regularly, like in the wintertime, it's like basically in the 40s and sometimes lower, depending on the snowstorm or whatever. I think we've had a warm winter recently. We go from this wet, green, gray, cloud, rainy everyday environment to complete opposite, hot, dry, dusty, like 120-degree in the summertime, like 80 in the wintertime temperatures. By the way, when it rains mud because of all the dust in the air. Like you go outside in the rain, and when you come back in, your clothes will have like mud splatters on them. Like the city doesn't have any like water infrastructure because it's the desert. They don't usually have to deal with it. So when it rains, everything just floods and you can't go anywhere. Like there's sewers, but like they're like drainage stuff, but it's not like well designed drainage stuff. It just kind of exists. Talking about the city like in general, because this was Riyadh, the capital city. I went to one of the other ones. It was on the coast a couple times, but mostly lived in the capital. We had half the buildings that were there were like half completed, under construction perpetually, but there weren't enough construction crews in the country to like build anything or like complete everything. It made it kind of creepy, honestly, because it looks like you're out in a post-apocalyptic video game or an abandoned town or something, because you just have these empty concrete husks of buildings, which I mean, kind of cool, but kind of creepy. Just it was fun. The compound was like that too initially. It was still under construction. I think we ended up calling it the abandoned sector. It was like one half of the streets on one side of this square is just under construction, and there's like a big old wall there. Occasionally we'd like crawl through the bushes, the dividing hedge walls that divided the streets, to go explore in there. But we weren't really supposed to because it's full of like construction supplies and loose nails and stuff like that. The general format of the compound was we had this big garden park area in the middle. Behind that, towards the front, I'm thinking from like the perspective where my house was. Behind that, there was a big old tent that had a bunch of shops and businesses. Like there was a pizza place and gelato, and there's a swimming pool and gym and the bowling alley. Continuing that direction, you'd have the main hall where you sign in and everything, and then the exit where you have gates on either side of this exit where it's like you actually have like turrets pointing out and like barbed wire on the outer wall. It was interesting going in and out of that. I mean, it was similar to like how some military bases are, but like overkill. Military bases will have like the barbed wire fence going all around the edge of it. This was like that, but like bigger. Almost looked like a prison. It was crazy. But the inside was really nice. On the outside of that park area, you'd have rows of houses. They were long houses that were connected to each other. So you just have long 2-story row houses, and then they're separated by walls, and that would make up the individual apartment. Initially, we had a smaller one when Dad was just living on his own before he had us with him. And then afterwards, we moved to the other side of the compound where they were bigger and actually meant for families. And then the opposite side from where the shops were they were called the Royal Villas. They were just like actual just 2-story houses, like fully constructed, separate on their own, have their own yards and pools and everything. And there were like 5 of those. We had a couple friends who lived in those. They were just kind of fun, I guess. It was just a lot more room in the houses. Most of the streets in between like the row houses, there were pools and general garden areas. It's good spots for barbecues. It was basically a resort.
It sounds very westernized.
Oh yeah, that's actually the goal with that specific compound and the compounds for the expats, because they want it to be like comfortable for the people working there, because all of the people working there are the competent people. Actually, like I didn't have a great opinion of the government and like how their bureaucracy worked, because it seemed to me that they pretty much just threw money at problems and gave like expats and foreign workers most of the competent work. But then they also had cheap labor from countries like the Philippines and other spots in Asia that they'd have people come over, work there for a bit. The people working there would send money home to their families. But it was really shady and kind of pseudo-slavery, because the company that would ship them over would take their passports so they couldn't leave.
Yeah, that's not an uncommon practice in countries like that. Basically, like, hey, you're ours now. We own you.
Yeah, they get treated really poorly, and if they lose their jobs, they still don't get their passports back, so you just have people trapped in the country. We tried to do outreach programs for that couple years in for my community service hours that I needed for high school. I teamed up with a couple groups around our compound to do like a charity drive thing, give them food, groceries, toiletries, that kind of thing. Tried to be nice whenever we saw them, because they were all lovely people. I never met one that was like a bad person. It just kind of sucked. Oh, that's another thing. So upon going to Saudi initially, like sure, I was like really worried of like all this, oh no, they're gonna hate me and try and blow me up or something. That is not at all how it is. The first time we ever went out as like a group to go do activities, we went souking. It's like shopping, but they have little storage containers in the walls. I'm forgetting the word for it, but it's just the storage facilities that just have like individual, like the roll up metal doors. We have them here, but there was just like a collection of these all together, and there'd be shops inside of them. It was known as the souks. Like you'd have like rug stores and food places and general souvenir antique shops, and one spot that does like custom brass lamps. There was just all kinds of stuff that you'd find in these places.
That sounds incredibly specialized. Like you'll get one store that's good at one specific thing.
But yeah, they had specialized stores for all kinds of stuff. There were a couple that we went to that were just completely like full of random junk. So I got to know the antique pocket watch at one of these souks. It was just in one of the. It looked kind of like an antique store, but like really, really, really messy. It was just random old just piled in corners and shelves, and they had like random gemstones just on shelves, just out in the open. It was messy. It was a little fun. I believe my sister pulled the adorable little child card and got a bunch of free shit. Culturally over there's this huge focus on family and kids, and like if you have your whole family out and about together, hospitality,
Privilege?
that too. There's a bit of that. Like stores and mostly restaurants have actually segregate family and singles. So like the downstairs will be for like single men usually, and then the upstairs will be for families, usually women and children. Of course, if you're all out together, it's just a thing. That was really interesting. Specifically because of this aspect of family, when we all went out together into the city for this first time, we were walking around in one of the historical section of the city, and this random family just invited us to come have a picnic with them. It was like someone we'd never met before. It was completely random. We couldn't even really communicate with each other. They knew very little English. We knew basically no Arabic. We were just invited to come have Arabic coffee and dates on their little rug that they set out in front of this big historical building. It was actually amazing. Like that specifically experience kind of like shifted my whole perspective on, oh wait, no, like the average person here is actually pretty chill, really cool. Actually, it's just the government that sucks. And like the occasional like extremist group, but I never interacted with any of those extreme people. It was just pretty much everyone I met was really amazing, awesome people.
Do you think that any of the kind of like kindness that you received had to do with you being a foreigner?
I think that could be part of it, because you go to another place and you're clearly from somewhere else, so that makes people think you're more interesting, I think. It's still a whole lot of just, if I had gone outside on my own, I wouldn't have gotten that treatment, because I'd be a single guy just walking around. Because we were all together specifically, it had a lot more of an impact. After that, it was getting dark at that point. So I believe at that point, we just kind of went home, had dinner, It was just the end of that experience. It was not much else of note happened that Christmas. It was just celebrate it in a foreign country, make friends with some of the kids around the compound, and then we went back home for the rest of the year, or the rest of the school year. At the end of 7th grade, though, fully moving over there, that was interesting. We actually got the chance to like adjust to the sleep schedule and get used to the crazy hot, dry weather. I had eczema perpetually, like dried out skin. Had to use a lot of lotion to not be like itchy and sad all the time. And because we weren't on a holiday that time, there were people around the compound that we could get to know, get used to, like, but it wasn't like Americans. It was like people from all over the world. Like we had a couple people from Spain, some people from South Africa that we were friends with, some people from Britain. It was all kinds of culture shock, but it was contained to the compound. So like it was its own miniature little melting pot of people from all over the place. It's probably similar to how early US was with all the settlers from all the different places. Probably similar to that, if I were to describe it. The school was like that too, but like to a much stronger degree because there were some like I think this was one of their advertising things. They had like some like 50, 60 countries represented in just their student body. So going to school there was interesting because it was completely different from my private school Christian education that I'd had before. It was like a public school but on steroids and funded out the wazoo. Like I'm used to like small little schools with like individual block housing. They're like those prefab buildings that you see in some places. They're
Usually the term is factory schools, schools that were literally designed to just bring kids in, get workers out. That's the only thing that matters.
yeah, pretty much. Which like a couple different like classical Christian schools. Those ones are crazy. Generally like private education with more rigor, I guess. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Is to make your kids smart. Woohoo. So going from tiny little school to huge, instead of 20 people in your grade, you have 20 people per class. Multiple different science and English classes going at once, like 100 people per grade, sometimes more, sometimes less. Its own track and field, 3 different sections where you have like high school, middle school, and then elementary school, which is kind of its own thing. They had 2 different libraries. The elementary school library had a dinosaur, like a T-Rex skeleton in it,
Whoa.
replica life-size, crazy shit. Even if it's fake, who puts a dinosaur skeleton in their library? Like, what the that's cool, but like what? This school is getting funded, but it's like it's part of this international school program. They have locations all over the place, and they're getting funded by like the kids of diplomats in like the ridiculously large royal family in Saudi. Like some of my classmates were literal like princesses. It was crazy. It wasn't like the Saudi Arabian royal family is huge. It's not like you have like one individual like main family. Like you do have the main ruling family, but then like cousins upon cousins upon cousins that just stretch out. But they're all royalty and they're all rich for the most part. And it's all oil money. So the royal family just doesn't have that much of a great reputation for intelligence or anything like that. It's just kind of like, oh, they pull off this crazy, insane shit because they just throw money at a problem and they just get away with it because they're stupid rich and in charge of everything. I mean, it leads to some interesting stories. Like one time the school held an auction. Some schools do like a fundraising class auction where they sell different services to auction winners. For example, they had one of their options was to park your car in the middle of campus for a week. And another one was to watch any movie you want in their theater, like proper, like not like bigger than a movie theater, amphitheater sized theater that they had. So you and a group of friends like go watch any movie. The money that went into that auction was ridiculous. The people who bought the park your car on campus for a week, a bunch of like royal kids pooled their money together to spend more than the value of their car to park their car on campus. It's just like ridiculous, just throwing out thousands of SAR. That's their currency, Saudi Arabian rial. When we were there, it was like 3.75 for $1. So it wasn't like crazy. It wasn't a small number either. And then the kids who bought the watching any movie you want in the movie theater, I don't remember how much that one went for, but they wanted to watch Infinity War when it was coming out. It was still in theaters at the time. So in order to fulfill this promise, what the school had to do was send one of their workers to go pirate the movie from the movie theater, so that they could watch it on their big screen. It's just like, what? Crazy bull, You have this crazy amount of money just being thrown around willy-nilly by both like the school, like it's constantly getting upgraded to like be nicer, and the student body. The one thing I wish they put more money into actually was their food, because they had school lunches, which were pretty good, but you'd get dysentery if you ate them.
Oh my
Like
god.
minor food poisoning. That was most of the food in Saudi because it's all imported. The only places where you'd be safe is like proper like restaurant stuff. Not fast food, just like actual restaurants. You're usually fine with restaurants, but like don't eat McDonald's. Don't eat McDonald's there, man. You'll die. You'll get poisoned.
Ooh.
I've heard of it happening. I don't know what they do, but they just must not like refrigerate the meat properly or something. I don't know. It's just don't. You'll get sick. You'll die. It'll suck.
I'm wondering if the people who live there, like nationals, just have iron stomachs to it, because people can just get good at eating that kind of food.
That's kind of like the water in like Mexico or whatever gives you like intestinal problems if you're not from there.
Oh yeah, that was another thing in Saudi. We had that same issue where we had to drink bottled water. We just go buy it from the store and just like plop it down in our big old refrigerated water dispenser and just get water from there because the tap water was poison. Oh, I was talking to one of my classmates about that in school actually, when we were over there, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you don't drink the water here because when you open the tap, it comes out brown." And I'm like, no, it doesn't come out brown. It's clear, actually. It's just poison. You might want to get that checked. So I don't know where she was living, but that's not a good thing.
Could she have been from like a less rich family or something?
Yeah, not everyone in the school was royalty and diplomats. A lot of the people there were actually people who were saving up ridiculous quantities to send their kids to this really great school because it's a really great school. It's probably similar to how people like save a bunch of money and you send their kids to college. It's similar pricing from what I can tell. Yeah, not everyone lived in compounds and not everyone was having their stuff paid for. We were lucky in that regard. Part of the school supplies was literally to have like a computer, a MacBook, though any laptop would do. The elementary school supply list literally included an iPad, but because school supplies were included within the deal we had with the company, they actually bought it for us. The computer that I'm using right now was bought by the company. Like, it's great. To be fair, it's now 5 years old MacBook Air. That's kind of falling apart, but it works out. I'll upgrade soon. It's fine. Oh, the school system itself, like the class structure was different because the school was an IB prep school, an international baccalaureate, which means if you graduate from an IB school, you can qualify for college anywhere in the world. You can go to college anywhere on the planet if you graduate from an IB school. But the system was different to how they do it here in America because instead of having individual subject matter for each different thing, you have like chemistry, physics, astronomy, whatever, or like with math, algebra, or like pre-calc, any of that stuff. Instead of that, you had integrated math and science, where you got a little bit of everything each year, and then you just build on it every time. That, on the way back, kind of fucked up my class schedule because I knew a lot about certain things and not enough about other things because it wasn't designed to integrate back into the US system. I was under a lot of stress over there, so I didn't actually learn all that much in school. I was honestly pretty depressed. A lot of that was from the homophobia that I was getting, both at home and just from the country in general, but part of that was just kind of being on high alert all the time. I kind of felt like I was like constantly in danger to an extent. I had this general cycle of like being slowly like degraded over time. Like the personality that you see here is completely different to how I was in Saudi because I was just completely withdrawn into myself, like had thick walls up to keep myself safe. I didn't want anyone to know that I was having a bad time though. I hid it really well. I just put on this front of like kind of class clown, happy-go-lucky, but underneath that it was just like a apathy, really sad. I didn't really want to exist. I mean, I'd been taught that, gay stuff, wrong, sin, bad, the gays will burn in hell. So when I was like, oh, I like men, actually, created this kind of internal schism because I am this one thing that I cannot get rid of no matter how hard I try, but I believe this thing is wrong. So what am I to do? And it just manifested as kind of self-destruction. I kind of hated myself because if I can't change this part of myself, if I'm gay and that's wrong, it basically led to me questioning all of the religion as a whole because I've been taught that being gay is a choice that people make. It's like, oh, you choose to do this bad thing. But that's not the case. I didn't want to be gay. I recognized that this was an issue and I didn't want it and I couldn't get rid of it. So it kind of started tearing apart the entire foundation for everything. So I was just kind of lost for a while. I had to reconstruct how I view everything. Saudi really just changed me completely. I'm a lot more tolerant of basically everything now. You do you so long as you ain't murdering someone, basically. I'm pretty good now, pretty healed from all of that. There were some nights there that I was pretty unalivey. That wasn't fun. I didn't get that much sleep. I was doing things that were basically different versions of self-harm. It wasn't great. But then we'd come home for the summertime and I'd be safe and I'd be not threatened to get murdered by the government. I hid it. I wasn't out to anyone, partially because that was such a dangerous thing to do. Like, me and my friends, we actually kind of had our own little gaydar, and all the queer people just kind of grouped together and hung out in the library. I didn't come out to people. Other people came out to me, and then I returned the favor, because like, oh, well, you've just told me your life-threatening secret. Well, me too. We're in this together now. So for the first couple months that I was there, it was pretty just kind of scary. But then once I could open up to the people who were like me, it was a lot nicer. It wasn't living. It was definitely surviving. I survived Saudi Arabia. Yay. Yeah, between missile attacks and dysentery, all kinds of stuff like that. It was definitely a little tricky. Oh, speaking of dysentery, school food. I ate it regardless of the food poisoning because it was tasty and it was easy. I didn't want to make a lunch. But don't eat lasagna. I don't know what it was. It was not lasagna. It looked like lasagna. It kind of smelled like lasagna. It did not taste like lasagna. It was like a slab of ground beef with like thin noodles in between. And I don't think they used cheese. It was some kind of sticky white substance. I'm afraid of it.
Uh-oh.
It was god awful. Uh-oh. Yeah, it was
Substance
terrible.
you're on
So, is that information that you're gay has been known for people that were not supposed to know it? Like, did you get in hot water for this?
Not while
Did the
I was over
information get
there.
out?
No, we were pretty good at keeping the secret. There were a couple instances where it was almost an issue, and I'll probably go into those in a minute. But like for the wider audience, like the wider public, nobody knew. It was like I was very paranoid about this because again, the government murders people for this. So I was just like secret, sneaky about the whole thing. Oh, it was scary too, though, because the government monitors the internet. I don't know to what extent. I've heard of one instance where the government hacked into a computer to get someone to stop researching what the their palace was or something like that. So it was sort of my dad told me. I don't have enough details to tell you, or probably shouldn't talk about that one, but like I know it happens. And based on where my dad worked, I was pretty paranoid because like, well, they probably pay more attention to our family specifically. But I also couldn't do much about it because like sure I had a VPN, but it was kind of and it didn't work all the time. It was like a free app that I found on the App Store.
Excuse me, but did I just hear VPN? Hi everyone, I'm Azil, but you can call me Azil. It's currently 2 a.m. and tonight I'd like to tell you about NordVPN. Now, if you're like our lovely friend here, stuck in a country that doesn't care too much for your kind, you might be in need of a VPN or virtual private network. There are lots of things a VPN is useful for, but today I'd like to focus on the importance of anonymity online in unsafe parts of the world. With the state of the world around us rapidly becoming less certain every day, it's important to keep an encrypted tunnel between yourself and the person or website you want receiving the information you're sending. This is especially true for members of maliciously targeted groups, but is also relevant to the general public, as your data might be getting sold or misused by internet service providers or other bad actors. With NordVPN, you can create that encrypted tunnel with servers all over the world, maintaining your anonymity and therefore safety online. I personally use NordVPN, and it will be vital in keeping myself safe during my upcoming charity stream supporting trans rights in the United States, because events like this are often targeted by trolls using IP-based attacks, which NordVPN completely protects you from. So, if you value your protection online, go to nordvpn.com/Azil for an exclusive discount on a 3-year plan. Your purchase supports my channel directly and makes sure you stay safe. Speaking of safety, I'm going to go to bed now before I pass out and hit my head on something. But again, that's nordvpn.com/Azil. Anyways, back to the video.
So back to internet censorship. There was two different kinds of the internet censorship. So there was stuff that the school did, and then there was stuff that the government did. The stuff that the government did, if you went to a website that they didn't want you to see, it was some kinds of foreign news agencies, and then mostly not safe for work stuff, just stuff that they wouldn't want you to see anyway. You'll see like this kind of like green screen with text on it. It's like reads both in Arabic and English. Like, oh yeah, this content is not authorized by government. I forget the exact wording, but it was something along the lines of that. I think you could get permission, or like if you believe this is wrong, send a message to this number. It was a whole thing. The other one was content blocked by the school, which is on the school Wi-Fi specifically, which is how most schools that have a technology, they just block certain subjects and keywords.
You know if a school is good if they allow coolmathgames.com. That's just the truth.
Yes, they did for a while. Eventually they banned that one, but then we found a workaround by using Google Sites with games built into them.
Yes, you use the Google Sites with the Flash file. That's exactly what we did.
Yeah, exactly. I like to around a little bit with the school website, like accidentally broke things just a little bit. I believe in 8th grade I got like at the end of the year I got a certificate for like hacking into the school system, but I didn't. I just clicked a link and it broke things. It's not my fault. I didn't do anything special. I just looked around a little bit.
You used the word certificate. I'm guessing that means something not positive there.
Oh no, it was just a participation award that everyone got at like the end of the year for their whatever special things they were known for. It wasn't anything malicious, it was just a little fun. At some point I was looking around at like on the Have You Been Pawned website. It's just a website that's just like, oh, has any of your information showed up in a data breach basically. So it was with that, and I followed some shady links that ended up getting blocked by the school, and I'm like, but before the school could block it, like for a split second, I had a Google Translate page pop up. So I clicked on the pop-up. It went completely around the school's blocking to the Google Translate page, so because Google Translate has a section on it where you can translate an entire web page if you input the URL. And I figured out that by using that, you could get around the entirety of the school's block system because Google Translate isn't blocked.
You used Google Translate as a proxy. Holy.
I used Google Translate as a proxy. What I ended up finding was some Russian hacker forum. That was interesting. I didn't want to down with that much because I'm like,
Yeah.
but it was interesting. I ended up finding the French version of Cool Math Games and playing it through the Google Translate proxy. It was fun. I didn't have a VPN on my computer though.
Texan.
I only had it on my iPad because you couldn't get to a VPN service anywhere. It was blocked by the government. You couldn't go download it. Like if you want a VPN, you have to go out of the country and then download it out somewhere else in order to get it. Thank God for Nord.
You know it.
Speaking of random bullshit that the school did, it's time to talk about the uranium kid.
Oh my god, yes, please.
This kid, he was the kid of like one of the Russian diplomats to Saudi. He was a bit of a character. One year around October, I think this was his second year, I found him with another student unpacking World War II era German gas masks in the bathroom. Just like in the mirror. I walk in with these two basically middle school boys just like with gas masks on. I'm like, what the f are you doing? I'm like, oh, we're taking the asbestos filters out so we don't die for our Halloween costumes. I'm like, what? Where did you even get them? Something about Russian eBay. This kid was... I didn't like him all that much because he was a flaming homophobic racist and proud of it. So he'd brag about being like, oh yeah, all the gays should burn, yada 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 yada. He would just like say this constantly and was proud of it. I didn't like him at all. And the worst part is he was like friend group adjacent. So like he was friends with one of the other people within our library group. So he'd come hang out with us at times. So this kid like took away my ability to be like a little bit fruity in public. Like,
Oh, boy.
come on, man. He just show up and I couldn't.
You should have just rerouted his brain. I don't know. Just give him like subliminal
Oh my
messaging
God.
is so good for the human brain. Make him gay. Like that's the ultimate flex.
Well, for the most part, from what I've seen, the most like homophobic people are just in denial. So
Yeah.
absolutely. They're so far in
Yeah.
the closet they're finding Christmas presents.
I mean, you were already in the Middle East. Denial wasn't that far away. It's just in Egypt.
No.
Oh my God.
Oh my god.
oh my god, we would have layovers in the Cairo airport. So like I've seen the pyramids from the air. It's cool.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
That's actually really dope. I love looking at giant triangles.
Right? Doritos, man. They're
That's
basically
fucking-
giant
that's fucking
like Dorito
hog.
buildings. So yeah, this kid, the uranium kid, one day he like walks up to me before class start, like because I'm hanging out in the library. He walks up to me. He's like, "Hey, take a look at this cool thing I have." And he pulls out this little sleeve made out of, you know, that lead bib stuff they put on you in the dentist to give you x-rays? There's a sleeve made out of that. And he also pulled out a Geiger counter. And I'm like, So yeah, this kid brought active uranium to school for show and tell. We didn't have show and tell, but it was basically just to show off that he had active uranium. Like pulled this little plastic bottle out of the lead sleeve and held the Geiger counter up to it, and it went wild. It went nuts. It was like the bass dropped at a rave or something. It was crazy. It was just this little shard of gray metal. It looked like a rock, but it was a very radioactive rock. So of course I'm like, well, that's interesting. So I immediately proceeded to tell the entire school about it. Literally everyone I met. But like on the down low, you know, so like I'd walk up to someone, it's like, hey, so and so brought uranium to school. You should go look at it. Like the day after that, he comes up to me, he's like, have you been saying? Like, nope, I don't know what you're talking about.
You're reminding me, and this is like super quick. There was a city nearby where I was growing up called Red Bluff. There was a $5,000 fine for detonating a nuclear device. And you know why that was made? There was a kid in his school that built a small nuclear reactor out of thermostats.
Oh my god, that happened there?
That happened there as well, but it has happened in multiple places.
Oh my god.
So you've reminded me of the other aspect of the uranium kid. He kept getting chemicals on loan from the science lab. He highly implied that he was building something.
Uh-oh.
The one other chemical that I remember by name was that he grabbed sulfur for some reason. I don't know what he was doing, some weird home chemistry. I don't know why. He just puts the gas masks and the radioactive substances together. Like all of that within context is just really kind of worrying. Plus the racism and all that. It's just like, what the are you making? What are you planning? This is wild.
The uranium kid. What type of girl are you?
Exactly. They're like obsessed with like either like World War II memorabilia or they like go around the hallway and pretend like they're shooting people. Like every school has one of those kids.
Tag your uranium kid from high school.
Oh, we also had a missile drill one time. Only once, though. The city installed a missile, warning system. It was just basically air raid sirens. Literally air raid sirens. It was basically the same thing as an earthquake drill. You just hide under a table in a room. It was a mix between tornado and earthquake drill. We did get missile attacks, actually. Not all that frequently. Only a couple times per year. And it was kind of hard to tell because, well, one, the city had a built-in, all around the whole thing. There were, trucks with anti-missile defenses just parked everywhere. If you drive outside the city, you'll see them next to the road. And they normally did a pretty good job of shooting stuff down before it could reach us. There was one incident where that didn't happen, where the system malfunctioned and it didn't work. It's technically a government cover-up, but it has a Wikipedia page, so I can probably talk about it. Sometime 2018, there was this loud boom, ground shakes a bit, that everyone felt around the whole city. I texted my friends about it, hey, do you guys feel that? Yep. One of the compounds started to cover it up and say a tire exploded, but considering how everyone in the whole city felt it, it was not the case. Some of my friends' parents were at the Royal Airport on that day. I guess they were coming in and out from whatever they were doing for their jobs. The staff wouldn't let them off the plane, but looking out the window, they said they saw fire on the ground, which is the missile people bombed the airport. Whoops. But then I looked this up a week later. The official Saudi news agency was oh yeah, everything's fine. We shot it down. Nothing happened. But that's inaccurate. I have videos on my computer of some of the debris falling from people who just got spread around the city. I can probably find that. Well, not right now, but I do have it.
I think we know what uranium kid was building.
Oh my god. So one time, I actually physically saw a missile with my own two eyes, the missile strike, actually. We were walking down from our house to the park to go have basically a park picnic dinner thing that the compound was hosting. It was family dinner night or something, I don't know. I forget the name. It was something cheesy though. Family fun night, maybe? It was fun, usually. They just had a bunch of food out, pastries, buffet style. Get as much as you want. It wasn't super great, super delicious, but it was pretty good, adequate for Saudi food as far as Saudi food is concerned. Didn't give you dysentery usually. So we're walking down to the park, and all of a sudden, out of the sky, you just see this bright streak that looks like a shooting star just go straight down. I'm oh cool, shooting star! And it disappears over the wall, and then a couple seconds later, I hear a boom and the ground shakes. And I'm oh, that's not a shooting star. Oh no. So that was exciting. I think that's the only time I actually saw it physically with my own two eyes. Every other time was just the ground shakes and you hear a boom. That one was exciting though. At some point I intend to paint that scene just because it's very memorable. It sticks out of my memory a lot. It's exciting. Missile attacks, it sounds really scary, and it kind of is, but it honestly was just a part of life. It happened and we just were oh, weird. And we went about our day because they weren't shooting at the general populace, us. They were shooting at everything, at the ruling royal family stuff. So the palace and the other palace, and then the royal airport and whatever else they had. Some of these missiles were kind of shoddy. They'd blow up halfway. It was very much hack job kind of deal. But it worked out. I'm gonna jump tracks a little bit to talk about all the haram stuff. So Saudi Arabia has a ban on not safe for work content, basically all drugs, even painkillers are really hard to get, alcohol, and pork. Like me, I'm not allowed. Anyway, so this is an issue because we like all of those things, minus the drugs. But even then, going without alcohol for a while, I don't drink, but my parents do. Bacon. Oh my god, bacon. Anything to make the eggs better over there. They're flavorless. So what we did was we took a half-pound bag of bacon bits and a half-pound bag of beef jerky and swapped the contents. So we emptied out the beef jerky and put in the bacon bits and resealed it. And we'd put 4 of those in a suitcase. Every time my dad would go back and forth because he had to go back to the US to maintain his medical license. It was a whole thing. So he'd bring back these giant bags of bacon bits and we just put them in the freezer and we'd have them for months. and just we'd ration the bacon bits. We did that too because we didn't want to be there in the summer because the only thing that would keep us there is school. And since school wasn't happening in the summer, we just went back home during the summer. So on our return trips, we would just load up on as many snacks that we could never get, like extra cheddar goldfish, like certain kinds of Oreos, candy, York peppermint patties, like everything that you wouldn't normally be able to get because the supply chain over there is shit. We just loaded it in, including bacon bits. So I'm technically an international smuggler because I internationally
Oh,
smuggled
hell yeah.
bacon into the country. Woohoo. I love just saying that to people. It's like, oh yeah, I'm an international smuggler, technically. And they're
Put
like,
that
"What?"
on your resume.
It's literally passed the background check. I have smuggled bacon, and I do not regret it at all. The other thing was with alcohol. We had to make it ourselves. We had brewing closet, which was just the closet under the stairs. We repurposed the empty water bottles and put like grape juice and non-alcoholic beer, and we filled it with yeast. My dad actually got pretty okay at making his own not alcohol. We also tried making root beer, like this, just the soda, because they don't have root beer over there because there's beer in the name. Root beer is my favorite soda. Come on, man, it's delicious.
Why didn't they just
So-
rename it?
I don't know. It's really weird. Oh, well, that and the fact that there's this weird thing with international stuff where the medicine over there tastes like root beer because it's root beer flavoring in the medicine, where over here we have like grape flavoring in our like liquid medicine. So, but they have a grape flavored soda using the exact same flavoring. So we have like this trade of like our root beer to them tastes like medicine and their grape soda to us tastes like medicine, and it's a little weird. I'm thinking that might be part of why they didn't have root beer, but I'm pretty sure it was literally just because it had beer in the name and they just like none of that, which is stupid, but whatever. I drink the inferior Coca-Cola. I drank it while we were over there, but then when we came back and I had root beer again, I was like, oh yeah, this is shit. For the most part, I drink water. I used to drink a lot of milk before we went to Saudi, but then Saudi milk is just kind of terrible. I just stopped drinking milk, and now I'm just a water person perpetually. Yeah, we just had a little moonshine operation in a closet, which is kind of exciting, you know. I almost got in trouble for that, though, because during science class, when we got to the fermentation process, we got to talking about it in school. Like, I think we had to do, like, a science lab based on it. To just be like, oh, yeah, yeast produces CO2 and stuff, and bread rising and all that. I knew a lot about it, and I described the process in detail to all of my classmates, and they're like, why do you know that? Hey? I'm like, well, you see, no reason. I'm just intrigued. I heard about this. It was cool. Anyway, I just like gloss over the whole thing. Pretend it didn't happen. It's fine. I didn't get in trouble for it. It worked out. I'm pretty sure they were a little bit suspicious, but it's fine. We're good.
I'm curious
Uh,
about something. In the event that your family was found to be making alcohol, do you think the government would have just brushed it off because you're expats that are making?
So, I don't know. The general response with expats committing crimes is to deport them. So, but also like people who were living on the embassy, like the embassy was its own compound. The American embassy was its own thing, like its own separate compound with where the actual diplomats stayed. They had their own commissary store where they could buy alcohol. It was like the only legal place where you could buy alcohol in the whole country. But like it wasn't supposed to be get like distributed off, but like it was very clearly within the community. So I don't know how much they would care. I think it's like they know it's happening, but they're just not going to deal with it because, well, it's not an issue for the most part, and it's keeping
Right.
people happy. More things that are maybe a little bit illegal over there. I know that there was a way to get weed because one of my friends had it. But I have no idea where they were getting it, just that it exists and I was offered it once or twice. I was like, I don't know, my brain's kind of fucked up right now. I don't really want to make it worse. So I turned them down. But yeah, drugs, like any kind of drugs, that stuff is super, super illegal. They're really strict about it.
How about
If you're caught
prescription
with drugs, you get
drugs?
so they're even strict about prescription drugs. Like it's really hard to get painkillers there. Like anything that you need to like exist that's not like an addictive mind altering substance is a lot easier, but they're still pretty like careful about it. I never really had that much of an issue with like medicine or anything because dad's a doctor and he was doing doctory things, so he always had a supply of cold medicine and all that. But you know,
Yeah.
it worked out. Want to hear about the cool traveling that we did? The
Sure.
mildly crazy international shenanigans? Because we didn't really like Saudi all that much, whenever we got a spring, winter, whatever break, we would just dip and go to another country because everything was a lot closer. We didn't have to cross the whole Atlantic Ocean, so we could go like international touristy destinations that you see on magazines and stuff, like Greece and Rome and Cyprus and all that kind of thing. Going to a bunch of different countries like this it's awesome, for one, because, you know, you're traveling the world at the cost of whatever horrific trauma Saudi gave me, whatever. It's fine. But my most memorable, like my favorite everything that we did was everything archaeology related, because you could go to all of these just ancient sites and just explore them. They're not like how they are here in the US where everything's cordoned off and put in a museum. Like, you could just walk around in the ruins of an ancient city and find pottery and glass. Like, I have like shards of pottery and ancient Roman glass that I picked up off the ground and took home with me. This stuff was just like out there unprotected, and this stuff was just like on the ground getting ground into dust by foot travel. So I'm like, well, on one hand, it's probably not great to take ancient Roman trash, but at the same time, it's not like it's going to survive because people are walking on it. So, yoink. I guess it's also technically international smuggling of artifacts. Maybe I shouldn't admit to that publicly. Anyway. It looked like a mini city carved into boulders. It was cool. One of them, it was very clear that the site was still actively being excavated, and one of them had like half of an arch sticking out of the ground and like with like shrubbery around it. It's like very clearly untouched. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go in there. So I got down on my belly and I shimmied into this little hole that's basically an unexcavated tomb. And you know what I found? A bone.
Ooh.
Specifically a small rib bone. And I'm like, ooh, this is cool. So I grab it and I shimmy out and I'm like, go up to mom. I was like, hey mom, look at this. Look what I found. She's like, what the put that back? I mean, like, you know, in motherly terms with us swearing, but basically that. Excuse me, did you just find a piece of an ancient human? You can't take that. Put that back. Put that back exactly where you found it.
But he's not using it, so...
Pulled an Indiana Jones right there. It was fun. There were a lot of places like that where it was just like half excavated and you could just crawl into little holes and hope there's not a snake in there. I was a little bit reckless at the time.
Did you bring back like a bone of some sort, like back in the US?
No, I did not. Well, unless you count the fossils, pottery and glass for the most part. I did not internationally smuggle human remains. No, that would be bad. Yeah, even I'm not that stupid. I like rock hounding and stuff like that, so I have like cool fossilized coral and stuff. Like I have coral that I found in like Thailand, I think. It was very fragile, and it was a wonder that I got it home in mostly one piece. But it's just like this little piece of branch coral that I have on a shelf somewhere. I don't know what I'll do with it. It's just there, which is cool. Speaking of rock hounding, Saudi Arabia. The only reason I ever go back to Saudi Arabia is their rock hounding. Specifically fossil hunting, because the landmass spent a significant portion of its history just underwater. So there are incredible fossil beds. I lived in Texas for a while, and Texas is also known for having lots of fossils, but Saudi was, the quantity and quality of everything there was incredible. I have never seen anything like it. I found like perfectly preserved seashells that look like they came right off of the beach. I have one that's bigger than my fist. It's just huge. And there's like coral and like leaf imprints. There's also a mystery rock that looks like metal. It's very dense, it's very heavy, but it's non-magnetic. And I've taken it to rock shops before and they just don't know what it is. No one can identify it. My best guess is something called tektite, which forms when an asteroid impacts the planet and throws molten stuff everywhere. And there was an asteroid impact a couple hundred years ago. They actually found the asteroid and yanked it out, and it's in the Royal Museum. I've touched it. It's cool. It's just out on display. So it could be tektite, but tektite is usually like really light and small, which this isn't. So I don't know what it is, and no one seems to be able to identify it, but it was all over the desert.
Was the uranium kid that just dropped his rock? You found it.
I mean, I hope not. Maybe? I don't know. The city was on like this big ass plateau. So when you drive off of it and drop down into the valley beneath it, that's where you'd find all the piles and piles of fossils, because it would just erode off of this cliffside and pile up in places, and you could just dig through big old mounds of, I mean, it's basically sand dunes. It's the desert after all, but sand dunes full of loot and stuff.
So it's literally like being able to
Saudis-
go into the backyard as a kid and actually find treasure.
Literally, it's so cool. We didn't go on that many rock hunting expeditions out because, well, I had homework, busy most weekends, but when I could make it out, like, it was awesome. I still have like 4 or 5 jars, like big gallon jars of rocks that we shipped over when we moved back. It's so cool. I probably shouldn't ever be allowed back in the country because my suitcase would be so heavy, it would explode. Sorry, I get really excited about fossils and stuff like that because it's just fun. It's treasure hunting, so. And you get to keep it because it's a rock.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting.
I do rock hunting when I'm home now too. Like there's like apparently like fossil crabs somewhere nearby that I need to go find because that's awesome. Anyway, Saudi also has like a ton of history. Like people have been living there for centuries. Google Earth and I zoom in really close on the desert, and they were everywhere. There's hundreds of them. There's just concentric rings of stones that are like ancient burial mounds, and they're just out in the desert on top of cliffs. They're everywhere across like the entire landmass that is Saudi. It's not an island, and it's a peninsula. I think that's what it is, the Arabic Peninsula. I wanted to go out and look at one of these, but the closest one was like a couple hours away, so I didn't end up doing that. It would have been cool though. Not to dig into it because it's literally a grave, but like to look at it. Don't want to get cursed out there, man. Who knows what the f*** is up with that? There's a couple different, the Saudi government being really f***ing scary things that I haven't talked about yet, which amazing that I've forgotten because this was the wildest shit. The first thing that happened, the first year that we went there, was the Ritz-Carlton incident. And basically, what ended up going down was the king decided that, the royal family's getting a little bit too big and the money's getting a little bit too spread around. So he decided to do something about it. So what he did was round up a bunch of his relatives into this fancy hotel called the Ritz-Carlton and basically blackmailed them to give him all their money. It's like, oh, if you don't give me all your money, you die. And even then, in some instances, even if they did give up some of their money, they did still get murdered. So this like minor culling just kind of happened while we were there. And it wasn't like super public knowledge, but it was like something talked about kind of privately. I don't know how much coverage that has internationally. I didn't remember that being a big deal as much as the other one, which was the Khashoggi incident. Khashoggi was this Saudi reporter who lived outside of the country in, I think, maybe Turkey. He did a bunch of reporting and was very critical of the Saudi Arabian government because, they're kind of shitty. So they didn't like him very much, and he was living outside the country for his own safety. But see, he wanted to get married, and he actually wanted to do it like legally. So he went to the Saudi Arabian embassy in, I believe it was Turkey. I don't remember specifically. And he left his fiance out in the car, and he went in to do paperwork, and he never came out. 5 hours later, his fiance is just like, okay, this is weird. I'm calling the police. What ended up coming out is that they murdered this guy and tried to pull a Breaking Bad and melt his body in acid, which is the worst way to get rid of a body, by the way. That's really stupid. I 100% believe it was completely inspired off of Breaking Bad. That just feels like a Saudi government thing to do. But they got caught. It became like this huge scandal because, oh my god, you just murdered a guy. Can't do that. Nope, that's bad. So that happened while I was there. If I was concerned beforehand about getting murdered for gay, I was very concerned afterward. Because like, well, here's this incident where they actually did that. Not for gay, but for other reasons, but still. We also had one of my classmates just kind of disappeared one day, and no one talked about them again. I didn't really know them all that well, but he was in a couple of my classes, and it was weird that, like, he just disappeared. I don't know what happened with that. He could have gotten disappeared, he could have just moved, and I just never found out about it. Maybe deported. I don't know. I just have no idea. Within the context of everything else, it sounds super shady, but it's possible that it was just nothing. I do not know, and I don't think there's any way for me to know. I hope he's fine. It's probably fine. But still, it's a little bit worrisome. Oh, Saudi had this place, like speaking of Saudi being terrifying, they have this place called Chop Chop Square. It's the place where they used to do public executions. The two major ones were like beheading for, I forget what, probably murder. And if you steal something, they cut off your hand. I did meet one person who had their hand cut off. It was an older guy. I forget the context. It's been a while, but he had no hand. It was a Chop Chop Square thing. The square isn't used publicly as much anymore. I've heard the stuff still goes on, but it's more private behind closed doors kind of situations instead of out in the open. We did end up walking by Chop Square, though. It was gated off, and it was just a square, but in a city. It was just like building on all sides, and there was a gate. It wasn't all that exciting, except for the fact that people die there, which is something. We went to Jordan once. It was the closest that we could get to going to Israel. Is right next to it, because if you go to Israel and they stamp your passport, they won't let you back into Saudi. It's just a rule. I don't know how enforced it is. I don't think they actually check through your passport to look for a stamp from Israel, but like, it's a rule. That was actually one of our first trips out of the country. Had a bunch of ancient Roman cities and this place called Petra. The Roman cities were really cool, actually. We got a tour guide to take us around. The little bit of shady shit that happened there is that the tour guide took us to like a mosaic that was just like poking out of the side of a hill. And he's like, oh yeah, this is cool. And then he pried out some of the mosaic tiles and handed them to us. Like, this guy just like took apart ancient artwork and gave it to us. It's just these little square rocks, which is shady as fuck. He also gave us Roman coins that like washed out of the hill during a rainstorm. We bought them off of him. They're probably real. I don't know what happened to them. I know we have them still, but they're probably off somewhere else in like a storage room somewhere.
Does your family still need to visit Saudi Arabia from time to time?
No, Dad quit his job during COVID because the conditions became awful. But because it was during COVID and the whole world was shut down, we had repatriation flights, which was just like, oh yeah, if you're stuck in this country, we'll take you back to your original country. But those didn't come and go all that often, and we didn't know when the next one was. Oh well, we did. It was within 1 week. So we had 1 week to pack up everything and move. And we did. COVID, that in and of itself was really fascinating, because when we were over there, when COVID first starts popping up and it became a internationally recognized event, there was a hospital that had a infection map that I checked multiple times per day. It was mapped with black background and glowing red dots wherever COVID cases would. I'd check this thing multiple times per day to just watch the infection spread around the world. And it'd be like, when one case popped up back home, I'm like, yo, and I immediately went and texted my one friend. It was like, are you the one COVID case? It was fun. As COVID like became more of a thing and it started popping up in Saudi, like the whole city shut down. Everything went quiet. Like school shut down. I had to finish the last part of the year online completely, which was interesting in and of itself. It was so quiet. Like, you don't realize how noisy a city is when you've been living there for a while. Like, you have car noises going on perpetually, but no one was out and about. No one could leave. You could only leave to go shopping. So if you go outside, it's just dead silent. It was amazing. I'd never heard it that quiet before.
How was the COVID perceived by the people there? Like, as it first, like, arrived, like, were people like pro mask and everything, or was there like issues with all of that there?
Most of the response was in the supply chain issues, because Saudi already didn't really have that great of a supply chain. If you go into a store and you find something you like, you buy it in bulk because you don't know when it's going to be back. It's just kind of a mess. It's not like here where you can find everything all the time and you have Amazon shipping on its own. They have mail, you have mail boxes, but it doesn't really work. You're more liable to just have your stuff get lost in the mail and it gets stolen. But the main issue with COVID is that because these already existing supply chain issues, toilet paper gone instantly. Like, the essentials disappeared really quickly and they were really hard to find. It wasn't too much of an issue within our compound because we had our own store and it was kind of self-contained. But outside, it was havoc. Chaos in the streets. Well, no, not actually. Not really. But a lot of stuff disappeared and didn't come back. It wasn't as much of an issue as it was in other places, though. There was, in fact, a shortage of masks, but also people didn't really wear them all that often, or more they just didn't go outside, so they weren't needed. I don't really know what the rest of the city was doing, because even while I was over there, I lived in this pretty self-contained bubble of the expat community, which was pretty separate from, literally walled off from the rest of the city. So I don't really know how pretty much anyone except for my neighbors and classmates handled it. There were shortages of all kinds of things, mostly just essentials. Oh, and yeast for some reason. Everyone just had a bread baking craze because everyone was just inside and they couldn't go outside. So we were just like, okay, let's bake. So for some reason, like, yeast, just of all things, just you couldn't find. It was also an issue for alcohol, but whatever. You want to hear about a kind of gross, weird thing that seems to be cultural?
Yes.
Instead of showering or taking a bath, a lot of the Saudi guys over there would just overuse Axe body spray.
No.
Specifically
Ugh.
Axe body spray. Specifically Axe body spray.
My dad always told me
It was-
if you
it was-
need a shower and you use Axe body spray, you will just smell like you need a shower and used Axe body spray.
Literally is that. It is literally that. People smelled bad and they used Axe body spray instead of showering.
Ugh.
I don't know why that was such a thing. Maybe it's because it's the desert, so don't use as much water because all of it has to be like either pulled it out of desalination plants or there's this really huge reservoir underground that has a bunch of water in it. But also taking from that is really bad for everything because it's like sinking. It's you're pulling a California and you're sinking the ground, so don't do that.
Was water
So that was
expensive over
nasty.
there?
Not prohibitively so. You could survive off of tap water. I wouldn't recommend it. You'd probably get sick, but you could. I don't really remember. I think it was like 20 SAR a bottle, which is like $5. But there was like those 4-gallon water bottles. So they were big. It really wasn't that bad, but it was still like you have to go and buy it, which was weird. Oh yeah, bathrooms over there were a little bit different too. They didn't have stalls like we have stalls. They were each their own contained rooms with like a full door and everything. I actually really liked that about Saudi. The only
Yeah.
time I've ever seen that here is when I went to an actual like gender neutral bathroom. But it wasn't like the family bathrooms that you see. It was like you go into the men's restroom and then you just all of the stalls have like thick walls in between each door. I actually liked that. I felt it gave me more privacy, and also I, as a tall person, in a lot of places, I'm just tall enough to like where my head height is naturally above the stall. So I always have to like hunch down, and I don't like dealing with that. It's annoying. It makes my back hurt, man. Why can't I just not see anything in peace? Anyway, one time I got bribed by a couple princesses to date them. And everyone
Hmm.
just goes out at night instead, and they flip their sleep schedule. Which, I mean, okay, it works. I ain't gonna judge. But because of this whole thing, and the kids still have to go to school at the normal time, the classes did something weird for a month, and they gave us like specialty classes, or in school days were shorter. So these two girls were just kind of there. They're like, I think they were Kuwaiti princesses, part of the Kuwaiti royal family for some reason. Probably not direct, but whatever. They still had money. So these two come up to me and when I'm just sitting down doing my work, and they start asking me questions like, "Oh, well, what things do you like? Something that you don't have? What do you need? Like, what's your phone number?" And I'm like, "I don't have a phone." There's just a bunch of things I just didn't have because, like, oh, well, I don't really need them, and also we're in a foreign country, so it's not like I could use the phone anyway. We technically had an emergency phone, but it's for emergencies, literally just to make sure like all the kids are where they're supposed to be. Rarely had to use it. So I'm like, what the fuck is happening with these people? Like, because they've been in my class and I've seen them and maybe talked to them twice, but I don't know them. At some point, they're like, "So you want to date one of us?" I'm like, "No, not really."
Of course,
Start
they had to ask
offering
the
to be
one
like-
gay guy.
I was very much like not interested. I was so not interested and so very stubborn about it. They just pestered me for the whole class period of bribing me with random and trips and a car. Actually, honest to God, they said,
Oh
"We'll
my
get you a car."
god!
And I'm like, "What? No, I don't need any of that. Go away." I mean, it was too nice to say go away, but I wanted them to. And then class
You
ended.
should have taken the
and then
deal
I
at the
just-
very end, been polite, and just dipped with the car, dude. I'm gonna be real.
Yeah, but like, I wasn't in a spot where I would have handled that well.
Yeah.
It's okay to respect yourself.
But like,
You also don't want to get disappeared by the princess's family.
Fair.
that's true. I also don't want to that too. But I don't think they were serious about it though. Like, well, okay, I don't know because royalty and spoiled brats and all that. But I like That's that story.
I think you
All
summed up the terror of this whole thing and the good side very well.
So we finished that big recording where you told me and my friends about the craziness of living in a country so different from ours. But there was clearly a lot more to the journey that you took that brought you to the fear you had there.
Indeed.
And so let's start from the beginning of that.
All right. I was raised Christian, right? Which is your whole, like, specifically, like, conservative Christian. I had Bible stories growing up. We went to church most Sundays, anywhere that we ended up moving. My parents tried to build their community around Christianity, the Bible, the church. Like, a lot of our friends were based on it, and we went to private Christian schools. Everything in my life growing up was based around Christianity and religion. It was the foundation for my entire life and how I viewed the world. And that includes like all the whole shebang of like evolution is bull and the earth is really isn't all that old, and sometimes like dinos aren't a thing. Those were only in like the crazy Christian like books, specifically the curriculum that they had for basically every Christian school. It's like 30, 40 years old or something. It's really outdated.
Man, if your book says that dinos aren't real, you're just lame. Like, you're just less cool.
Literally.
Come up with a cooler origin story.
School libraries had like banned books, like Harry Potter wasn't allowed.
Oh my god.
Because black magic, and mom took away our Pokemon cards. And
That happened to my girlfriend too. Yeah. It's the Pokemon are demons. That's the funniest shit to me. Like, one of them is literally God, Arceus.
yeah, so banned books, banned Pokemon cards, banned anything really all that exciting, except for like silly bands on the playground or something, that kind of. So yeah, pretty big deal growing up. Foundational work. I was very religious. Like, thought I would end up going on like a mission trip, and when I grew up, would pray. Believed in demonic, like, oh, demons are influencing people's minds. Yada 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 yada. You know, that kind of thing. This kind of became a bit of an issue when I got it to the age where I developed like who I was attracted to, and it ended up not being girls.
Ooh.
Oh no. So, yeah, I like started having like dreams about naked men, and I was like, what the f is happening? I was very concerned. I can't be gay. That's being gay is wrong. It's a sin. I can't. That's not something that I could be doing. And I just like push it away, try and get rid of that, but it kept showing up, and it kept like getting stronger over time. And I was just like, oh well, this isn't okay. Let's do what we can to get rid of this. So I'd like pray about it, try and like be like, hey God, can you like maybe not do that, please? Can you get rid of this? Because this isn't great. I literally tried to pray away the gay. I put a lot of effort into this.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, not great. Didn't really do anything at all. This is around the time that we were swapping between schools and about when we started moving over to Saudi. So where I'm at is pray away the gay, please, oh God. Trying to get rid of it. Now going to a country that's kind of super illegal with that kind of thing, so even more of an issue. To be fair, for the first year or so, I didn't actually know about that law. It was just purely, so this is a thing with me, and I have to keep this a secret because I can't get rid of it, and I'm constantly committing this sin, and oh God, I'm going to burn in hell if I don't fix this. And I don't want to tell my family about it because I don't want them to be like, oh, well, you're being a sin and big whole thing. I didn't want them to see that I was struggling with this. Because I couldn't get rid of this, and because I didn't want my family to know, what I ended up doing was taking it upon myself to try and, like, I guess punish myself for this, because this is clearly a thing that I'm not allowed to do, or not supposed to be doing, and, you know, it's a sin in the Bible. I was told that I wasn't supposed to be doing this, and that anyone who does this is, like, purposely choosing to be sinful. So I was under the impression that, oh, I guess I've just chosen to do this because I'm making this bad decision and no one else is going to do anything about it. I should punish myself for this. Thus became a year of beating myself up about it. I got really depressed. My grades slipped. Any like failure in school would compound into this notion of I'm terrible and I can do better, but I'm not doing better. I know I can do better, but I'm not. So I need to put more work into this, but I'm so sad and in pain that I can't. It was just a negative feedback loop of not really wanting to exist. I withdrew into myself. I put up this class clown happy-go-lucky front because I didn't want anyone to know I was struggling. So I just put up walls, and I looked up some of my old messages from that time, and honestly, I don't recognize myself. It was so full of anger and sadness. Around the end of the school year, that first year, I just kind of broke. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I just sat in my room and cried for a good hour or so, hid. I think my mom came in. I tried to spill the beans to her. It's like, hey, Mom, I think I'm gay. And she's like, no, you're not. Like, that was my last attempt at reaching out to my family with that in that regard. Or at least not my parents. I told my brother. We're close. We've like shared a room our whole lives. He's supportive. He's great. But parents, not really. After that breaking point, I was actually pretty okay for a little bit. It wasn't better, but it wasn't as bad because I'd just been bottling everything up that whole time and just having it all out. Like that feeling you get after a good cry. It's like that, but more because it's a whole year's worth of or school year specifically. And then we ended up flying home for the summer. And I think I could tell. I knew that culturally people over there didn't really agree with the gay thing, but I just didn't know the law about it. So when we go home, like back to where we live now, or, back to the States, I felt a lot better just in general because we're back on home soil and I can see my friends again and I can eat the food that I want to eat again and not be constantly sick. And I can try and heal. During that summer, I asked Mom for therapy. She took me to this conservative Christian therapist. I'm sure she'd be great, but she couldn't help me with the main issue. Though, to be fair, I myself didn't even know what the issue was at the time. I just knew that I felt bad. I was kind of hiding it from myself. Most of this realization comes from hindsight. The summer months, I spent some time healing, kind of refresh, reset. By the end of it, I wasn't exactly excited, but I thought that I was like ready to handle it again going back. It was a bit conflicting because on one hand, like I recognize that it's an amazing opportunity, getting the chance to essentially travel the world at my age and see amazing things. But at the same time, it just sucked. It was awful. I liked getting to go do this awesome stuff, but I couldn't. It hurt. It hurt to be there. It hurt to exist. So we had that internal conflict along the way as well. It's like, oh, I don't want to leave, but I also really, really, really want to leave. So go back for the second year, and it's the same all over again, just worse. My streak of not doing great in school continues. Grades are slipping even more. At some point, we kind of figured out that, I forget if it was the first, second, or third year, I think it was the second year, that we'd figured out that I have ADHD, actually. And that's a big contributor to this whole mess. I was in no, like, emotional state to, like, handle it myself. And we're in a foreign country where it's not like we can get meds for that. We asked the school for accommodations, but I mean, it was nice, but I also didn't feel like it helped all that much. Like, they let me listen to music while doing work, and that was about it. More of the same, just getting behind in school, getting bad grades, a lot of pressure to succeed from everyone. Because parents are like, oh, well, we know you're smart, we know you can do it, but just do the work. But I was too distracted to really, I wasn't invested in it. I didn't really care. My main defense mechanism during this time was apathy, because it hurt too much to care, so to not hurt myself anymore than I already am is just ignore it. It didn't really work, but it was an attempt. During that time, I also started to self-harm. I wasn't just mentally beating myself up about it too, it was physical. Just doing a bunch of things to, at some point I looked up an article on self-harm, and every different method in there that's not necessarily like physically hurting yourself was something that I tried, like much exercise, too little exercise, sleep deprivation, soaking in like really, really, really cold water, just anything that I could think of. Oh, and also watching like gory shock videos online, that kind of thing. Kind of like self-punishment. I hated myself. I didn't want to exist. I wanted someone else to enforce that. Just pain. The same thing that happened the first year happened again the second. End of the school year, I had another breakdown. I just crashed. My general tolerance for bottling things up in that scenario seems to be about the length of the school year. This is also around the time I discovered the laws on the subject of being gay. So now I had to deal with paranoia of, oh, the government wants to kill me too. It was like, oh, well, that's how that feels. Because I genuinely feared for my life. I was genuinely terrified that if I let it slip, that I would be dead or I'd get executed. Because you're in this country where the government's doing terrifying and you hear about it and you're just like, oh, well, I don't want to get their attention because I don't want to get murdered by the government for existing. And I had reason to believe that they'd be paying more careful attention to her family. I can't really get into that, but I think I had a somewhat valid reason to be paranoid. That combined with, like, internet restrictions and couldn't really express or get an outlet for it. I had Discord pretty much. That's about it. People you talk to online, but I didn't really have anywhere. Well, there was a small group of, the gay friends at school. We all just kind of gravitated towards each other, just support each other. It worked out, I think.
And as you said during our first hangout in VR, the gay friend group was kind of unspoken. Like, you could just get the vibe, and then they started to attract to each other.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily have, like, a gaydar. Like, I mean, clearly I did, but I didn't realize it. It was like a subconscious thing where we kind of, like, grouped together on our own and then realized, oh, we actually have this cool queer thing in common. It wasn't just gay people. It was like, non-binary, lesbian, all the kinds. Just, the LGBT group. We just hang out in the library during lunch. We had like an hour-long lunch break for some reason. It was great. So the second year's breakdown was worse than the first. I kind of realized that this was getting worse and I couldn't make it better. I mean, we went home for the summer again, and again I started feeling better and I started healing, but it wasn't as good as the first summer break, because I'm sure there's many reasons for this. I mean, habitually beating myself up. I guess I'd speculate that's just built up of trauma, just dragging me down. Couldn't do much about it. Something I forgot to mention that happened during the first year, we went on a school trip in the wintertime to Switzerland. And one of my roommates at the time for the trip, I had to talk him down from himself, the Sudoku. Well, at the time I thought it was my fault because it had to do with gay. It was like, oh, well, I drove this person to feel that bad about themselves. It just kind of put another nail in the already very spiky coffin of, oh no, gay.
That's like the tagline for conservative Christianity. Oh no, gay.
Yeah. Man, what's the deal with that?
Y'all heard of this gay thing?
Getting pretty popular nowadays. You should try it.
All the cool kids are doing it.
Darn these newfangled kids and they're gay.
It still blows my mind that conservatism as an idea, that things like the LGBT community are, number one, new, and number two, dangerous thing. Like, I know they don't believe in evolution, but it's built in. It's literally built in. And it's certainly not threatening.
So, second year, this was around the time where I'd had about enough with religion being kind of shitty. So I started doubting everything. And because I was doubting, religion that my entire life and perspective on the world is based off of, I kind of went a little bit crazy. Not insanity wise, just my whole everything was very shaky. Well, it's kind of shattering to find everything that your life is built on up to a point is maybe not the greatest. Just the foundation of everything just swept out from beneath me and I'm just kind of lost, feeling and just kind of falling apart. And thus begins the third final and worst year, I think. This is the year where I recognize the cycle of, oh, every year that we're here, it's been getting worse and worse and worse. It's the darkest year. Everything that had happened in the first two is maintained, but worse, once again. And I can get pretty dang close to my own kind of Sudoku. I don't have a huge recollection of the third year. I guess there just wasn't that much worth remembering. I think I've just blocked a lot of that out. But I remember some nights in particular where I was very close to going through with it. I'd just sit and stare at a knife. Even now, these 3 years later, I still have nights where I feel like that again, I'm there, like it's those nights again. And it's always at night. Usually when I'm alone or stressed, I have to remind myself that I'm safe. I wasn't very stable at the time, and that resurfaces, and I'm once again very unstable. And it's something that I'm into counseling for. I'm trying to get a handle on it because I worry that while I'm not in my right mind, I'll do something stupid. It's hard. But we're home now and we're safe, and all that trauma, fortunately, started to heal from all that. I had to systematically restructure my entire belief system. I couldn't just discount everything that I'd seen before because some like happened that I'm like, oh, well, that's like probably a God moment, and I just can't, like, too much stuff has happened for me to just discard that completely. So instead, I've just reworked my faith and everything that comes with it into something that's not going to hate people for existing. I've just kind of taken like the core ideas and aspects and reworked it into something new for myself. I dislike organized religion. It's very hateful right now. I think that can change, but it's not going to be easy. I'm not going to like go into that. I just like the idea of talking about my own faith because it gets too close to proselytizing, and I don't like doing that. I want people to believe what they believe, and I'm going to accept them for it, like I accept myself. So you do you, as long as you're not hurting anyone, or at least as long as you're not hurting anyone and they don't want you to hurt them. It's shenanigans.
Good disclaimer. Good
It's
disclaimer.
complicated. It's hard to explain, but it's good. A couple years ago, after we returned from Saudi, we ended up at church, and I would just dragged off to church in the mornings, and I'm like, I thought it was just gonna be like your average Sunday mini rock concert on stage, and then people talk for an hour that I half listen to, and starts off, worship section goes on, and then starts off it's like, oh yeah, God loves gay people, and I was like, uh-oh, this is going to be interesting.
Uh-oh.
It was just like, oh yeah, we've got to make it clear what we think about gay people. And it was like, started off pretty okay, quickly escalated into people yelling about, oh, gay abominations, yada, yada, yada. I don't like that word anymore. So I don't like going to that church, and my parents drag me off to that church semi-frequently. It's kind of now an ingrained thing. I'm just like, yeah, I don't really want to go there. But aside from that, now that I'm home and safe and no longer paranoid and threat of execution, I'm doing actually pretty great. I mean, I'm like in the gay club at my college. It's like I have plenty of accepting friends. It's like the closet door is basically glass. I don't know how my parents haven't noticed yet. I'm basically out except to my parents.
Yeah, considering how important not being gay is to a lot of conservative Christians, they're often not very good at noticing.
Yeah. So my parents are actually, I love my parents. They're great. They are pretty great people. Like, and they've calmed down and chilled out a bit over time. They're a lot less conservative now. I mean, they still are, but they're not the crazy Twitter ones,
Yeah.
Like, Harry Potter's allowed. Sister gets to read Harry Potter. Like, we can have Pokemon cards if we want. It's all of that stuff is chill now. Main takeaway is just accept yourself. My God, take care of yourself, love yourself, just be happy with who you are, whatever that may be.
Tell me a story, I wanna hear it. You might think it's boring, but I'm interested.
We were talking about gay, and then we just talked more about gay, and then it just fell down a gay spiral. A gay hole, if you will.